This is Skywatch Media News for the first week of April 2018. There is something disturbing happening to the vast bodies of water on Earth that has become a worldwide concern. An eerie retreat of the sea leaves behind but a trace in the sand. The tide's sudden and unexpected withdrawal is met with sober curiosity. The anomalous ocean phenomenon happening in our world has now become symmetric, where both receding and expansion is occurring in unison, as if the waters are attempting to find equilibrium. The underlying question that is now emerging is one that requires some critical thinking. What force is powerful enough to cause the world's oceans to be in such turmoil, in opposition to each other? If rational explanations were in order, then the sudden and unusual tidal retreats could be easily dismissed as natural occurrences, in which case the mystery would be solved and people would move on. But that is not what we see here. The ocean anomalies are happening all too frequently. There is a pattern developing, and people have come to understand that something just isn't adding up. Something isn't right with the Earth's oceans. The disappearing waters is an intriguing story, a story that is unnerving to some people, as such events are considered highly unusual. On March 31st, another extraordinary retreat of the waters happened, this time along the coast of Connecticut and Massachusetts. One commentator from the Massachusetts Cape, who had spent a good portion of his life in this area, said that he had never seen water so low. Now, to be fair, there was a blue moon on the evening of March 31st, which also happened to be the fourth blue moon to rise since the beginning of 2018. But the sky phenomenon simply does not explain the unprecedented and extreme retreat of the waters in these coastal areas. There is likely other forces at play here. With each passing day, we discover something extraordinary has taken place somewhere in the world. In Argentina, the sudden appearance of a network of new rivers is creating havoc for farmers. The largest of these newly formed rivers actually began during a deluge back in 2015. But since that time, the water level has continued rising, and it has now become a deep and wide river named Rio Nuevo. It is now 15 miles long, and at its deepest point, it is 197 feet wide and 82 feet deep. For people living here, their world has changed. Imagine waking up from a torrential downpour where the land that surrounds you has opened up like a canyon. Vast mounds of earth, grass, and trees suddenly carried away. What was once a flat pasture land has become a roaring river. This is the new reality for the farmers in the flatlands of San Luis, which relies heavily on the production of soybeans. Until the late 20th century, this area known as the Del Morro Basin had been used for grazing cattle. But then beginning in the early 90s, the government pushed the ranchers into farming, with emphasis placed on the production of soybeans and corn. This satellite view of the watershed, where the Rio Nuevo made its appearance, indicates that this area was once sprawling with dry forests, shown here in yellow. But it has since transformed into a wetland of rivers and washes, shown by black lines. These changes present problems for crop farmers who once used this land for grazing. The sudden appearance of new rivers has puzzled scientists. It has worried environmentalists, and it has discouraged farmers. Argentina accounts for 18% of the global production of soybeans, which accounts for 31% of their total exports. So unexpected earth changes could have a devastating effect on the overall survival of this country and its people. While new rivers appear in Argentina, much further to the north, giant sinkholes are scarring the landscape in West Texas, where a vast stretch of oil fields spanning 4,000 square miles are sinking and uplifting the ground. Satellite data used to measure ground changes shows multiple disturbances near Pecos, Monahans, Kermit, and Wink. In some locations, the ground is sinking at the rate of 4 inches per year. In one spot, the ground dropped considerably, forming a new lake. These changes pose a great risk to roads, levees, dams, and gas pipelines, and so the area must be continuously monitored from space. The ground movement could reach well beyond the present area of concern, since the entire area has been punctured with oil and injection wells since the 1940s, and new findings associate this with ground movement. What is even more troubling is the surge of seismic activity around Pecos in the past 5 to 6 years. Ironically, earthquake activity had not been recorded in this location prior to 2012. Although earthquakes and surface subsidence could be a coincidence, the possibility that these earthquakes were induced by hydrocarbon production cannot be excluded. Parts of West Texas are sinking and other parts are shaking. Studies point to oil and gas extraction as the instigator. But here again, there is the likelihood that other factors are in play. On April 3rd, a wall of dust rolled across the Permian Basin of Texas near Midland. The haboob crept in just prior to a powerful cold front that moved across the region. Check out this time-lapse video which captured the dust storm as it moved in. Volcanic unrest is increasing across the globe, and especially along the Ring of Fire, where several volcanoes are being carefully monitored in 2018. The explosivity of each eruption has its own unique characteristics. The eruptions of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, Mount St. Helens in 1980, and Mount Pinatubo in 1991 were all enormous. But even these eruptions were pale in comparison to ancient eruptions, such as Wawa Springs, Toba, Yellowstone, and Long Valley Caldera. These were thousands of times more explosive, as shown in these spheres, which represent the volume of erupted rock fragments and particles from the most widely known eruptions on Earth. Recent geological studies and observations by volcanologists indicate there is a 95% probability that the Earth will experience an eruption of a VEI 5 or higher on the explosivity index within the next 5 years. The last time an eruption of this intensity occurred was the 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo, nearly 3 decades ago. The time span between eruptions of this intensity has been as long as 23 years, going back 3 centuries, which means the current gap, which is 26 years, happens to be the longest in the past 3 centuries. Therefore, a VEI 5 or higher eruption is overdue. Through the 20th century, as shown in this list, an eruption of intensity 5 or greater came at intervals, varying from 1 year up to 23 years. With an average interval of just under 7 years. As for the first 2 decades of the 21st century, there are no eruptions that have reached the level of a VEI 5 or higher on the explosivity index, as shown in this graph. To assess the consequences of a VEI 5 or higher eruption, it must be evaluated between a short and a long-term perspective. In the short term would be the immediate loss of life and property, which is dependent upon populations. There are far more people living in the danger zones today than there were in the past, but volcanologists are much better equipped to warn people of the dangers that lie ahead, allowing evacuations to take place much earlier. The number of people at risk in this century has been estimated at 500 million or better, which accounts for more than the population of the United States, which then accounts for a lot of people, even in today's standards. As for the long-term impacts, it depends entirely on the location of the eruption. A massive eruption could trigger a year without a summer, and possibly 2 years. This would depend on certain conditions being met, which are the extent of the ash fall and the buildup of that ash, the altitude of the ash plume, and how long the eruption persists. This would not be an eruption like Toba, which ultimately affected the evolution of humans, but rather an event that would catapult planet Earth into another ice age or even a glacial age. The size and magnitude of an eruption will then relate to the extent of the damage that results from the event. The most recent large eruptions are shown here. With the exception of Novaruptu, these volcanoes resulted in the immediate loss of life and structures, which were generated by pyroclastic flows, ashfall, gas emissions, and tsunamis. Here, too, we are referring to long-term consequences for the planet, where such eruptions impacted the climate for long durations, as the ash was injected into the stratosphere at high altitudes. Similar to the Mount Pinatubo eruption, it has the capacity to trigger temperature changes, which can severely affect crops, which can lead to famine and epidemics across the world. In the year 1816, following the eruption of Tambora, abnormal temperatures swept across China, Europe, and North America. It became well known as the year without a summer. So, should we be concerned about this? Absolutely, we should, as these eruptions are highly unpredictable, and the long-term damage that can occur is insurmountable. If history is any indication, this will happen again, and it cannot be prevented. If statistics are accurate of a 95% probability of a massive eruption, and we have no reason to believe otherwise, then we have 5 years or less until the next VEEI 5 or higher eruption takes place, in which the consequences will certainly be cataclysmic. So be prepared, or do the best you can to be prepared for the next volcanic winter, as it appears it is just around the corner, since there is no technological or engineering marvel that will be able to prevent this from happening. Unrest is building up in Iceland's second deadliest volcano, which for 250 years lied dormant. The seismic monitoring system of the Icelandic Meteorological Office has picked up 14 significant tremors in the volcano during March, which makes that month the most active for the volcano since systematic measurements began back in 1976. The tremors are very significant since the volcano has been historically quiet, which indicates that something unusual is happening here. Memories of the flight chaos caused by the 2010 eruption of this volcano in Iceland's glacial southern region may worry airlines and locals. 7 years ago, the volcano erupted, sending a choking veil of ash into the skies above Europe. The volcanic dust blackened out skies and grounded 100,000 flights, which severely affected Iceland's economy. This is just another sign that volcanic activity is increasing dramatically all around the world, which will require 24-hour monitoring in regions that are on alert status. Spring officially arrived to the Northern Hemisphere more than 2 weeks ago, but judging from the weather, it's still winter. Asir, a region in Saudi Arabia, was covered in snow following heavy rain and a drop in temperatures. The region experienced a mix of rain and snow for more than 6 hours on April the 3rd. In the upper Midwest, another winter storm dumped more than 7 inches in various cities across this region. A few cities had set daily snowfall records which shattered the previous ones. In Wausau, Wisconsin, the record was almost 4 inches greater than the previous record, set in 1923. More snow is expected, which may leave many of you asking, where is spring? Just about everyone is in agreement that the weather is out of control. But when it comes to determining the actual cause for the strange weather, there is much disagreement. Recently, a story surfaced which raises a red flag concerning weather modification, a technique used by industrialized nations to control weather patterns, usually for self-serving purposes. In an article dated April 1st, China is in the process of building a massive weather modification system. They are presently testing the system in the Tibetan Plateau through the use of cutting-edge technology. The system is created from a network of solid fuel-burning chambers that produce silver iodide, a compound with a structure much like ice that can be used in cloud seeding. Tens of thousands of small burning chambers will be installed across the Tibetan Plateau in an attempt to increase rainfall in the area. Once in place, the system has the potential to increase rainfall in the region by up to 10 billion cubic meters a year. The system has been developed by China's state-owned Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. The weather modification system was originally developed as part of China's defense program. China, the United States, and Russia have all developed weather-changing technology to possibly impede opposition in times of conflict. Countries have researched ways to increase the chances of drought, flood, or other natural disasters. The chamber's operations will be guided by precise real-time data collected from a network of 30 small weather satellites monitoring monsoon activities over the Indian Ocean. The ground-based network will also employ other cloud seeding methods using planes, drones, and artillery to maximize the effect of the weather modification system. Tibetan Plateau has huge glaciers and massive underground reservoirs. The area is often referred to as Asia's water tower, and its effects directly to most of the continent's biggest rivers, including the Yellow River, the Yangtze, and the Mekong. The rivers are of extreme importance to almost half of the world's population. The government of Northeast India has raised concerns that China's weather modification system will trigger more devastating floods and will interfere with the natural ecosystem of the Tibetan Plateau. Weather modification has certainly been a topic of concern by those who have doubts about the implementation of the system or if it is actually being used for its intended purpose. Regardless of the intent, the jury is still out as to whether the system plays a major role in controlling the jet stream and global weather patterns. There is a sense of unease in today's world. People are searching for an outlet where they can freely express moments of anxiety. Hidden among all of the chaos and confusion of a world that is transforming is a subtle message for you to discover. You are not alone in your thoughts. There are many astute individuals who have acquired similar feelings of anxiety. They too are finding it difficult to cope with the many earth pains, and yet they have a strong desire to share their experiences with the world, or at the very least, with those who are willing or eager to listen. Back in August of 2016, I had the unfortunate experience of coping with an unprecedented flood that swept across much of south-central Louisiana. It was a catastrophic event. It happened quickly and caught many off guard. They were unprepared because they had become complacent. They accepted the notion that horrific events only happen to others and not to them. The reason for people turning a blind eye to changes that are unconventional is the fear of not knowing what lies ahead. But if you are able to recognize the signs, then you know that we are living in unprecedented times. The Great Flood of 2016 became a humbling experience for many Louisianans who had encountered personal loss, who honestly believed that their lives could never change. What is thought to be a once-in-a-generation event no longer meets the criteria of normal weather phenomena. Everything has changed. It would be a misconception to revert to the standard way of thinking. And so we keep looking to the sky for comfort and guidance in perilous times. For it is from the heavens that all wisdom and knowledge shall come to pass. Thanks for watching.